Hello, entrepreneurship enthusiasts. You are listening to the Founders, Futurists, and Failures podcast. I am your host, Conor Flynn, and today our guest is Ramon Lozano. Ramon is the entrepreneur in residence at the Conroe Economic Development Council, where he is working to build the entrepreneurship ecosystem in Conroe, Texas. During our conversation, you will be exposed to numerous strategies for developing an early-stage startup ecosystem. Founders, Futurists, and Failures is brought to you by Startup Commons and Entrepreneurial. Startup Commons is dedicated to digitizing and connecting startup ecosystems globally to scale entrepreneurship, innovation, and business creation around the world. Startup Commons provides digital connectivity and solutions to enable data-driven economic development and policymaking for local ecosystems. Entrepreneurial is working to prepare the next generation of entrepreneurial leaders for careers in startups, impact investing, and economic development. You can support this podcast by purchasing Founders, Futurists, and Failures t-shirts at entrepreneurial.com. In this episode, we will learn about ecosystem surveys, industry cross-pollination, and the roles that economic development organizations can play in ecosystem growth. Now, let's go into the details with Ramon as we explore the tactics for building an emerging entrepreneurship ecosystem in Conroe, Texas. You are assisting with startup ecosystem development in Conroe, Texas, which is one of the fastest growing cities in the U.S. What is the culture like in Conroe?
Thank you, Conor. As you know, I'm working with the Conroe Economic Development Council, which is the lead economic development entity for the city of Conroe. It operates using a portion of the community sales tax proceeds to undertake recruitment efforts, land acquisitions, incentives, etc. But historically, that organization is focused on primary job creators, large companies that exist already. But about 2 years ago, the CEDC hired a firm to do a strategic plan for the organization. And through that strategic planning process, it was discovered, because they solicited opinion from the community, that there was a desire, a need to develop the entrepreneurship ecosystem such that it could assist, coach, mentor entrepreneurs in the community to go from concept to actually creating a company, scaling, and then eventually growing into an autonomous company itself. So Conroe, a city of about 82,000 people just north of Houston, realized, hey, we need to take care of the entrepreneurs in our community. And interestingly, possibly three of our largest employers in the community already pretty much started from the proverbial garage operation and became some of our largest primary job creators, two of them in the energy sector and one a medical device company. So there is a vibrant entrepreneur community, but right now we're in the stage of identifying who they are, what their needs are, how to help them, and then establish some mechanism, some vehicle to help them, mentor them, and get them from conception to actually launching their company.
Great. So you've explained how the startup ecosystem in Conroe is fairly early stage, but there's still a vibrant entrepreneurial community. So what initiatives are you pursuing in the early stages of ecosystem development?
Well, for starters, because we've never measured what the entrepreneurship population is like in the city of Conroe, is we're going through a process of surveying the community in person, online, through meetings with the actual entrepreneurs, and we're trying to measure the entrepreneurship community based on about 4 variables. The variables being fluidity, connectivity, diversity, and density. So how fast is a company going from conception to actually launching? connectivity. How are these entrepreneurs connected to institutions in the city, in the region? Diversity, and in this case, diversity means two things: diversity ethnically and diversity industry wise. We're trying to measure that as well. And lastly, trying to measure the density. Do we have a few of them? Do we have a lot of them? What industries are they focused on? So right now we're going through the process of identifying who they are, because right now, as I say, we don't know what we don't know. So we're going to measure it through a survey instrument, uh, their fluidity, connectivity, diversity, and density. And that way we have a good feel of who these entrepreneurs are. Industry wise, we've a second initiative we're launching is we're using our existing employers, manufacturers, which are pretty much in the energy sector and the medical device sector, and selecting one individual from each of these companies. So we'll have around 15 or 20 individuals, one from each company, and putting them into a setting where they will work on a project. In this case, what we're planning to do is have them work on what's called a Raspberry Pi, which is a single board computer that can be simply programmed using Python. And having each of these representatives from the industry all in one room to learn this in a very simple way. They're not going to learn how to extensively code, but know how to work with a prototyping platform, also learn problem solving, and most importantly, exposing them to an environment everybody in one room to cross-pollinate. So essentially, we'll have 15 to 20 representatives, one from each of the companies in our community in Conroe, all in one room, and they're all going to be focused on one task, working on this Raspberry Pi, programming it, a very simple program. It's essentially pretty much making an LED light flash. Sounds simple, but there's a lot of steps in the process of programming, hardware interface, etc. And in the process, all these people are talking to each other and realize, like, wow, I've learned an additional skill set of problem solving with dealing with prototyping. And how can I apply that when all is done, when they go back to their respective companies, is how they can apply that skill set that they've learned and also the relationships that they've developed in that setting. So that's another effort we're doing. So we're doing the survey aspect of it, and we're also facilitating this cross-pollination aspect of it as our initial efforts to gauge, probe the entrepreneurship community in Conroe.
Excellent. So it sounds like this measuring initiative is going to help you get a handle on the specific entrepreneurs and sectors in the ecosystem. And you already have identified the energy and medical device established players, and you're going to help them cross-pollinate.
Correct. And we started off the interview of how Conroe was identified by the Census Bureau as one of the fastest growing city. I believe it was between 2015 and 2016. And right now, the lead demographic entity in the Houston region, it's an organization called HGAC, Houston Galveston Area Council. They maintain the numbers on what the growth trends, et cetera, in the Houston region. Why is that important? It's important because they're identifying the growth trend, the growth direction coming toward Conroe, and Conroe continuing and accelerating in their growth. This is important. So whether Conroe wants it or not, it's going to continue growing at an accelerated pace. And in the process, we need to not only take care of our existing industry, the primary job creators, but also the companies that'll be of the future. As you know, our economy is changing of how jobs are created, how companies are created. So in the process of taking care of our current industry, is we also need to prepare for what the future is and preparing these entrepreneurs who will be the future job creators. Because right now, in the future, we can't use our current yardstick or our current key performance indicators to measure tomorrow's success. We can't use that. So we need to be planning, like, what are we going to measure success in the future? We can't use our current numbers. We need to be thinking of what can we be doing now such that based on what we know, based on what we're measuring, based on what we're studying, to make sure that we are making plans and taking steps to continue Conroe's development and diversity industry-wise, etc.
So just out of curiosity, what would future success indicators look like?
I would say a future success indicator right now, number one, would be more diversification of our industry base. We are heavy energy in Conroe, energy, petro. A lot of the companies we have, great companies, but there is a concentration of energy in our area. We have, I believe, 4 national oil well Varco companies footprints in our community because there's just such a skill set of that in our area, the machining aspect of it, all of that feeds the energy sector. So a measure of success in the future would be diversifying our base of industry such that it's not so energy dependent and focus perhaps more on medical, IT, to complement what's currently happening in the Houston region. So a measure of success would be a more diverse base of our industry, and that the community, the Conroe Economic Development Council, has already taken steps forward in that, and they've acquired and are in the process of developing a research park. I'd say it's about 200-300 acres in size that they plan to accommodate these new industries into the community. So right now we have an industrial park called Conroe Park North that is about 600 acres that is pretty much completely developed. And the CEDC is in the process of acquiring an additional 600 acres to accommodate more manufacturers, but has reserved 200 to 300 acres adjacent to that specifically for high-tech type of companies. Right now, to our south is the township of the Woodlands, which has a very attractive, successful tech corporate office type of population in the community. But it's development wise, it's reaching its maturity. It's pretty much built out. So the next phase is of the growth will be toward Conroe, and we've got the space, the acreage to accommodate that growth. But we need to make sure that in the process, what we bring in will complement to what we want to be in the future. And again, that would be a diverse economic base that has all the industries such that we can weather, for instance, a protracted period of low energy cost per barrel, that we could weather those periods with a diverse base. If we have all energy sector, it makes it difficult because we're at the mercy of the cost of oil per barrel.
Yes, diversification definitely makes for a more resilient economy. Are there any other ways aside from the industrial park and bringing in medical and IT companies? Are there any other ways in which you see Conroe's startup ecosystem evolving?
And I guess with the evolvement, one of the most important parts is having the tools to monitor this ecosystem. And when I say monitor, I believe that the role, the task of monitoring the ecosystem, I don't think it should be the role of the city to do that. It should be the role that's taken on by entrepreneurs themselves. I think they would do the best at it. And if you look at the Kauffman Foundation, which is one of the premier research organizations on entrepreneurship in the U.S., the Kauffman Foundation did a survey of who pretty much works on these ecosystems, and had a small percentage of around 10% involve cities tending to the ecosystems. It's usually entrepreneurs themselves. And I would tend to agree with that. But at this stage, our role as the CEDC is at least to plant the seeds, etc., to make sure that this happens, and then pretty much get out of the way and let it grow. And we would serve as allies, but we wouldn't control the action. Like, we need to let them being the entrepreneurs, run, develop, guide this population demographic of entrepreneurs in the right direction. So right now, our goal as a CEDC is, hey, we did a strategic plan. The community said, hey, let's take care of our entrepreneurs. They hired me to work with, identify who these entrepreneurs are, come up with some strategies, lay the groundwork, and then pretty much let it plant the seeds, and then let's see what happens. In no ways, in my opinion, is the role of the city to serve as the city in a government capacity to control this endeavor. It's the idea is we plant the seeds and let's see where it goes. Because right now, this has not happened organically. So we were stepping in and planting the seeds again, and hoping to see what direction it goes. And at the right time, we'll step away and then serve more as an ally, someone that the entrepreneurs can come to, but certainly not an entity that would operate it or control the development of the ecosystem.
Right. I love the planting the seeds and community empowerment approach.
One of the aspects, and again, once we've done with this, probably around June or July, with this study that measuring, identifying the ecosystem in Conroe. A lot of the tools that we're using originated from the Kauffman Foundation. Some of the strategy that originates from there. But we need, when it's all done, a document will be produced and then passed on to whomever who will oversee this. One thing that'll be important is the simplicity of being able to gauge it, to measure it, to identify it, such that when new members come in, they can quickly connect with others. And right now, we don't have a tool of that nature, a dashboard, if you will, that'll show, for instance, say an organization did indeed form in Conroe. So let's just say that something that they could use to measure those four variables of fluidity, connectivity, diversity, and density of the entrepreneurship ecosystem. When you can, those four variables, when you can compress the amount of time a company takes from conception to launching, if you can compress that amount of time, it makes the likelihood of success increase. If it takes too long to go from the conception to the next step, people lose interest. Time is money. People have kids, families, work, so ideas die. So one of the goals would be to compress the time it takes from someone having an idea to actually launching, and compressing that amount of time with the mentoring and all the tools all in one stop, if you will, to help them launch their company. So that is one of the things that we would also focus on.
Yes, the time aspect is very important. So Conroe is 40 miles away from Houston, Texas. How is the Conroe startup ecosystem connected to Houston's startup ecosystem?
We're connected very much so on a industry wise. A lot of the primary employers in our community support the industry that's in Houston. Again, particularly the energy wise. And as you know, the Houston economy, and again, Houston is the fourth largest city in the country, and with a population of about 7 million people. In the industries that it has there in Houston, you've got energy sector, pretty much any and every global oil company has a presence in Houston. Number two, you've got the life science. You have the Texas Medical Center, the world's largest medical center. I think there's a baby born at the Texas Medical Center every 20 minutes, and it's got 8 million visits per year and about 50 million square feet of developed space. It's big. It's the world's largest medical center. So we've got the energy. We've got the world's largest medical center. We've got NASA, and enough about that on NASA. And we've got the Port of Houston, and the Port of Houston is one of, if not the largest by tonnage of foreign goods coming into the U.S. So you've got these four players: energy, life science, NASA, and the Port of Houston, all in their own little silos in Houston, and impacting all the surrounding communities, including Conroe. So how does Conroe connect with that? Well, there's various organizations that are, as we speak, in the process, in flux, developing, recognizing, coordinating their efforts. And probably one of the most important ones, one of the newest players, is an organization called Station Houston. And they're identify themselves as the hub of entrepreneurship. And I would say that's probably one of the ones that we're really trying to connect with, because they're a great resource for contacts, for networking, for events, for promotion. I would say that's probably one of our most important allies that we're trying to further develop our relationship with, because they fit right with what our needs are. So the entrepreneurs in our community, Conroe, because Conroe, even though it's only 40 miles away from Houston, in traffic, it can be an hour, it could be an hour and a half, or if not more. So at the moment, I live in Houston. I kind of go back and forth and collect the information of all these entities, pretty much attend any and every event in Houston, and forward it on to the entrepreneurs in Conroe, and developed somewhat of an organization we've called the Conroe Region Entrepreneurship Guild. And it's an informal group of entrepreneurs from the Conroe region who are going to start meeting regularly. And it'll be kind of an informal network of just sharing ideas from events, etc., just to kind of, again, plant the seeds and get people talking and get the buzz going to see how it is. Because of limited resources, and I'm only one person currently who's, quote, planting the seeds, or who's been assigned that task, is we're trying different things. And if it doesn't work, we'll pull the plug on the kind of the fail fast mentality, where we're going to try something, this Conroe Region Entrepreneurship Guild, get a feel, people show up, let's talk. Is this going to work? If not, move on to the next thing, to identify what works in our community or not. So right now, to kind of go back to your question, what are we doing? Working closely, trying to work closely with the Station Houston and other players in the Houston region, and figure out what is the best relationship, what is the best way to get the entrepreneurs in one community talking to the others, to help them launch, essentially.
Yes, I love how you're working to organize the community as well as bridge the geographic gaps.
I think next steps wise for Conroe, once we've done this study, when we're done with that, when we kind of feel out people through informal events like this Conroe Regional Entrepreneurship Guild, when we're done with this industry cross-pollination testing, if you will, is assemble what we've learned and figure out what the next steps are. And one of the next steps, and this is a couple of months away, is the development of somewhat of similar to Houston Exponential, kind of a group that is autonomous from the city, autonomous from the Economic Development Organization, that will be tasked with, again, tending, kind of like a gardener, of tending to this garden of entrepreneurs, pruning here, fertilizing there, etc., and making sure that it grows. And so once this entrepreneurship committee gets formed, I think, is taking on larger endeavors like teaching people the lean startup methodology, having workshops on what it's like to be an angel investor. And one thing that's unique about Conroe is, to the north of it is a very large lake with a lot of large, beautiful homes and wealthy people who have a lot of money.
Right.
So the idea is perhaps tap into them and say, hey, you've got a little extra money. Why don't you become an angel investor, and invest in your community's entrepreneurs, and see what direction we go. And there is just an example, and I don't want to name names, but there's a kind of a mentoring VC angel firm here in Houston called Red House. Red House, because it's actually inside a red house, a very large red home in River Oaks, which is kind of a really nice area. in Houston. And one of the top persons there, or one of the co-founders, is from the Conroe area. I didn't know that. I found out about that about 2 weeks ago at Station Houston, and I was talking to them, and I said, "Hey, I'm trying to get this stuff done in Conroe." And he goes, "Hey, I'm from Conroe. What are you trying to do?" And it was just one of those serendipitous moments where it's just like, "Hey, we're all connected here, and we're all want the same thing, helping all these people, these entrepreneurs, again, go from concept to launching." And so that's one person I'll probably be hitting on soon, just for some ideas and or maybe some funds. I don't know, but that's kind of like the direction. So right now we're kind of in the research phase, feeling out the community, feeling out the industry, working with our big brother to the south, Houston, and then the next thing would be the probable formation of an entrepreneurship committee that'll take on bigger tasks like workshops that deal with lean startup, training VCs, more sophisticated efforts to take the community to the next step.
Great. Well, Ramon, thank you so much for coming on Founders, Futurists, and Failures. And I wish you the best of luck in developing Conroe's startup ecosystem.
Thank you very much. It's been great talking to you.